They didn't even wait for me to die before they threw me out. That's the part that stings the most. You expect betrayal to come quiet, creeping, but mine was loud, public, shameless. My own son-in-law kicked me out of the house I built my life in, and then threw a party for his parents the very next day. I'm Cassandra Marrow. Yes, this is a true story. You're probably thinking, no way could family cut that deep. But before you judge me, tell me this. What time is it where you're watching this? Morning, evening, middle of the night? Because betrayal doesn't check clocks. It strikes when your back is turned, when your hands are too full with the weight of your own sacrifices. And when it hits, it rearranges everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and blood. Let me take you there. It was a Saturday evening, September, the kind of warm night where neighbors drag grills onto porches and laughter hangs in the air like smoke. I had just locked up my salon, the sweet tang of hairspray still clinging to my clothes, and drove back to what I thought was still my home, my sanctuary. But when I turned onto the street, I froze. Black trash bags, my trash bags, lined the front lawn like corpses, clothes spilling out, framed photos shattered inside them. The little keepsakes of a life dismantled. The air reeked of barbecue, heavy with charcoal and ribs, mixing with the sickly perfume of some guest inside. Music thumped from the open windows, bass shaking the walls that once held my laughter. And there they were, Devin's parents, two smug figures planted right on my porch like they had been waiting years for this victory. His mother wore a wide-brimmed hat, sipping sweet tea, as though she owned the very air. His father leaned back in my rocking chair. My husband bought me that chair when I was pregnant with Alexa, rocking slow, steady, like he was daring me to take it back. Humiliation scorched through me. I wanted to march across that lawn, rip those bags open, and scream until my voice shattered. But I froze because Alexa appeared in the doorway. My daughter, my only child. She looked at me and then looked away, as if my shame was contagious, as if she couldn't risk catching it in front of them. I whispered her name, but the music swallowed my voice. She disappeared inside without a word. My chest tightened. That was the moment I knew this betrayal wasn't Devin's alone. My daughter was standing with him. Against me, I walked slowly toward the porch, not trusting my legs. My eyes burned, not from tears. I was too angry to cry, but from the sheer disbelief that this was happening. That's when I saw it. On the porch table, buried under paper plates and a sweating pitcher of lemonade, was a folder, half open, a slip of paper peeking out. My heart stopped when I recognized the header, Property Deed Transfer, unsigned. My hand twitched toward it, but Devin appeared in the doorway, blocking me. He wore that smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, the kind men use when they think they've already won. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his chest puffed like a politician making promises. "Evening, Cassandra," he said, voice smooth, deliberate. "Didn't expect to see you. Didn't expect. This was my home." But the way his parents' eyes narrowed, the way Alexa hovered just behind him, told me the truth. They'd all been waiting for this moment, for me to come home and realize I had none. I backed away, my throat burning with words I couldn't afford to spit out. Not yet. My hand clenched the strap of my purse instead. If I said the wrong thing, they'd know I still had power. Better to let them think they'd crushed me. So I turned. I walked away from my own porch, my own life while laughter erupted behind me, full, wild, careless, as if they were mocking the years I poured into that house, into raising Alexa, into surviving Kendrick's betrayals. And in that laughter, I heard something else. Faint, low, close to my ear, though no one stood beside me. I swore I heard his voice in my head. The old crow won't last long. Maybe rage gave him the words. I froze in the street, the night closing around me, heat rising from the pavement. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks. Maybe it was my rage giving him words. But it felt real. It felt like he was already inside my head, laughing at me, daring me to fight back. And if he was daring me, he was about to find out who I really was. They say every storm starts with a calm sky. Mine began in the late 90s, back when I was young, starry-eyed, and foolish enough to believe love alone could weather anything. Kendrick Merrow was just a lanky law student then, hungry, ambitious, the kind of man who made you feel like you were standing next to your own future when he smiled at you. And me, I was already cutting hair in a small rented space downtown, folding towels, and sweeping hair while chasing tips to pay rent. Kendrick would sit in the corner, nose buried in casebooks he couldn't afford, while I slipped him sandwiches between clients. That was our rhythm. I worked, he dreamed, and I believed with my whole chest that my hustle and his brilliance could make us unstoppable. We married in a courthouse with one witness, a judge who barely looked up from his papers. No gown, no veil, just my favorite blue dress, and a nervous laugh that got caught in my throat when he slipped the ring on my finger. I thought it was perfect. I thought that moment meant forever. When Alexa came, our love turned into something bigger. She was my reason to keep going on the nights when my hands ached from braids and my feet screamed from standing 12 hours straight. Kendrick held her like she was made of glass, swore she'd never know struggle the way we had. I believed him. I wanted to. I funded his dream. Every dollar I earned went into his tuition, his suits for internships, his bar exam fees. I drove an old Chevy that rattled like it was held together with prayers. But Kendrick walked into law firms sharp and polished, his future stitched into his tailored jackets. I thought I was sewing into our life, into our shared tomorrow. Alexa was the glue. Her laugh filled the cracks. Her little drawings on the fridge covered up the growing silence between me and her father. She loved family dinners, where we'd squeeze into our tiny kitchen and pretend the world outside wasn't pressing down. She'd cling to his arm and beam at me like, "See, Mommy, we're still whole." But cracks were there. I remember one evening, Alexa was 5. We were in the yard. She was chasing fireflies, and old Miss Ernestine from next door leaned across the fence. She was the kind of neighbor who saw everything, spoke little, but when she did, it was a stone dropping into still water. "Cassandra," she said, her eyes fixed on Kendrick, who was chatting too long with some young woman from down the block. That man's eyes wander more than his feet. I laughed it off, told her he was just friendly, told myself she was just being nosy. But later, lying in bed beside him, I couldn't shake the echo of her warning. His phone buzzed more. He came home later. He smelled of cologne that wasn't his. Still, I brushed it away. I thought loyalty was a rope that could hold a sinking ship. The years rolled, his paycheck grew, his suits got sharper. And me, I convinced myself that sacrifice would be rewarded, that the nights I stayed late in the salon, the days I cut back, so he could rise would circle back into gratitude, into stability, into love. But instead, they circled back into betrayal. The same hands I helped steady on law books reached for other women. The same mouth that promised me always whispered lies into ears that weren't mine. And when I finally filed for divorce, I did it with shaking hands, not because I didn't believe I could survive without him, but because I couldn't believe I had survived with him for so long. I thought, at least Alexa would always see me, always stand by me. That was my blind spot, believing blood alone could bind loyalty. I was still standing on that thought when the sound of a throat clearing yanked me back into the present. I blinked. Night had fallen, the party lights glowing harsh against the porch where Devon's people still laughed and filled their plates. My belongings still sagged in those bags on the lawn. And there, on the edge of the sidewalk, stood Mr. Langley, another neighbor, shoulders hunched like he didn't want to be caught in the crossfire. His cap tugged low, his voice barely carrying over the music. "They told me to tell you something. Cassandra," he said, eyes darting toward the porch like he was afraid Devon might hear. My stomach sank. "What is it?" He swallowed hard, then spoke the words like they tasted bitter. They said, "You can't come back here anymore." The ground tilted beneath me. The guest house window was the only square of glass between me and the life they had stolen. I stood there, my breath fogging the pain, staring at the heap of my belongings slumped like corpses in garbage bags on the lawn. The porch glowed with string lights, laughter spilling through the night like broken glass. And then I heard it, Alexa's laugh. My daughter's laugh. It floated across the yard, soft but sharp enough to cut through me. Once, that sound was my anchor. Tonight, it was the knife twisting in my ribs. I turned from the window. My eyes fell on the last relic I had carried into this cramped space, a wedding picture of me, and Kendrick. We were so young in it, my hand resting on his chest, his grin wide like he had the world figured out. My chest tightened, not from nostalgia, but from rage. I snatched it off the shelf, glass cracking under my grip. With a guttural sound that startled even me, I hurled it against the wall. The frame shattered, glass splintering across the floor in sharp little shards that glittered in the lamplight. A piece sliced my palm open. I didn't flinch. The sting felt right, blood answering betrayal. I pressed the wound against my skirt, my gaze snapping back toward the porch. And there he was, Devon, my son-in-law, swaggering. That's the only word for it. His voice carried, even over the chatter, barking little commands at the servers his mother must have insisted on hiring. His father sat back, smug, like a king watching his heir-marked territory. And Devon strutted across my porch as if the property lines had been redrawn in his favor. The papers on that table said otherwise. I had seen them, unsigned, unfinished, a crack in their empire they thought was invisible. But cracks spread. I pressed my bloody hand against the cold glass, watching Devon slap someone on the back, his laughter too loud, too forced, like he needed to prove he owned this place. My nails scraped the pain. "Enjoy it while you can," I whispered, voice low, steady, almost foreign in my throat. I thought of all the years I spent holding Kendrick up, all the nights I worked my hands raw to give Alexa the world. I thought of how quickly both had let me become disposable, furniture to move out when they wanted more room. That was the moment the grief burned out and something darker took its place. "This house may be brick and wood to them," I murmured, but it's blood and bone to me. It wasn't just property. It was where I nursed Alexa's fevers, where I patched Kendrick's first suit when he couldn't afford another. Every corner of it carried my fingerprints. And now it reeked of perfume and barbecue smoke, their celebration staining it like grease. They'll regret this, I said, louder this time, the words latching onto the air like claws. I pressed my cut hand against the window pane, leaving a smear of red across the glass. Proof. A mark. Somewhere deep inside, the part of me that used to forgive, that used to excuse, tried to whisper reason. But it was drowned out by the roar of humiliation, of betrayal. I watched Devin raise his glass, Alexa beside him, smiling not at me, not for me, but for them. And in that instant, the vow took root. I would not cry. I would not beg. I would not fade into memory while they lived fat and happy off the pieces of me. No, I would make them choke on every smile. The night air wrapped around me like a dare. The party inside was louder now, the bass of some old R&B track rattling through the walls that once sheltered me. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from focus. I had seen the papers earlier, sitting carelessly on the porch table beneath a sweating glass of lemonade. That deed was my only leverage. I slipped out the guest house door and moved like a shadow across the yard. Each step sank into the soft grass, carrying me closer to the porch where Devin's kingdom unfolded. Laughter swelled, glasses clinked, the stink of grilled meat thickened the air. Their joy was my camouflage. The table was cluttered with half-eaten plates, napkins stained with sauce, perfume from one of Devin's mother's endless touch-ups. But there it was, the envelope, brown, heavy, the corner curling upward like it was waiting for me. My pulse jumped. I reached for it, fingers brushing the edge. Mom. Her voice. Alexa's. I froze. My daughter stood just beyond the screen door, her silhouette framed in the golden light. She stepped out, the night catching her features in sharp relief. Her eyes didn't soften. They hardened like she'd rehearsed this moment. "What are you doing out here?" she asked, her tone clipped, grown colder since the afternoon. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. My hand slipped the envelope against my thigh, sliding it beneath the folds of my cardigan. I started, but she cut me off. "Why can't you just let us live our life?" The words hit harder than any slap. Her life, as if I was some intruder trespassing, not the woman who birthed her, bled for her, built every brick of this house. I wanted to shout, to ask her if she remembered who signed every tuition check, who braided her hair when fever kept her up at night. But I didn't. I just looked at her, the silence between us heavier than anything I could have said. And then I walked past her, not fast, not timid, just steady, my hand pressed tight against the envelope hidden against me, its weight a small victory. I didn't glance back, not even when I felt her eyes burning into the back of my neck. By the time I reached the guest house, my phone buzzed. A familiar number. Terrence, an old friend, an attorney I used to swap clients with back when the salon was thriving. Cass, his voice was low, urgent. I pulled what I could from the county clerk's office. Kendrick never finished the transfer. Legally, you're still tied to that property. Devin's playing house with smoke and mirrors. I leaned against the door, pressing the phone hard to my ear, every word striking like iron. "You're telling me this is still mine?" Not finalized means not theirs. But you'll need more than my word. Paperwork. Proof. I looked down at the envelope pressed against my stomach. Proof. Or something close to it. We said our goodbyes. His promise to dig deeper, ringing in my ear as I slipped my finger under the flap. My hands shook, not from nerves, but from the electricity of possibility. I slid the deed out. The familiar lines of property description filled the page. The signatures, mine, Kendrick's, blank. My heart surged, but tucked inside, folded once, was another sheet. Not official, not stamped. A scrap of notebook paper. I unfolded it with care. The words were jagged, scrawled in Devon's hurried hand. The old crow won't last long. My breath caught. My grip tightened until the paper crumpled against my palm. Laughter roared again from the main house, louder than before, but wasn't celebration to me anymore. It was mockery. They thought I was disposable. They thought I'd fade quietly. Not anymore. The salon had always been my sanctuary, a place where women came to spill secrets while I shaped their hair into crowns. But that Tuesday afternoon, the walls felt thinner, the air heavier. I was rinsing out a rinse and set when two men in suits slipped into the waiting chairs, talking in voices just low enough to make me lean closer. One of them kept tapping his shoe, jittery, like nerves were eating him alive. You tell him the laundry's moving through the church now. One whispered. The other gave a tight nod. Yeah, that pastor's got no shame. Community funds right into the basket. And Devon's crew schemes before the ink dries. Clean as it gets. My hands stilled in the woman's curls. I was rinsing. Laundry. Church. Devon. I didn't need anyone to spell it out. My son-in-law was dirtier than his press suits let on, and the sanctuary he paraded Alexa into every Sunday wasn't holy ground. It was a washing machine. I bent closer to the sink, hiding my face in the steam, but my ears were burning. Every instinct screamed to step back, to stay quiet, but I couldn't unknow what I'd just heard. The bell over the door jingled, breaking the tension. A familiar figure shuffled in, Mrs. Ora Rivers, 80 if she was a day, retired city clerk with a sharp eye and a sharper tongue. She had been my client since Alexa was in pigtails, and she never missed her standing Wednesday appointment. Cass, you got time for me, or you too busy eavesdropping? She teased, dropping her handbag onto the counter with a thud. The men stiffened, then quickly gathered their coats and left, the bell chiming again as they vanished. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat shouting warnings. Mrs. Ora lowered herself into the chair, watching me through the mirror. You heard something you weren't supposed to, didn't you? I tried to play dumb, reaching for my comb. People talk all the time in here. She smirked, and I spent 40 years filing papers no one wanted seen. Don't play coy with me, girl. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. Devon's tied to that church. Everyone knows it, but what folks forget is money leaves a trail no matter how clean you think it looks. I froze, comb midair. What are you saying? Her eyes narrowed. I still have friends in the clerk's office. Property deeds, donation filings, transfers. I know how to trace paper, Cass. Even paper they wish didn't exist. Hope flared, quick but dangerous. If Mrs. Ora could prove what Terrence hinted, that the deed was still mine, or if she could connect Devon to laundering, it would be the leverage I needed. But then my paranoia crept in, the kind that had been growing like ivy since the night I saw Alexa turn her eyes away from me. What if my daughter wasn't blind to Devin's schemes? What if she was knee-deep in them, smiling at his side not out of loyalty but out of partnership? The thought made bile rise in my throat. I set the comb down before my shaking hands betrayed me. "You okay?" Mrs. Ora asked, eyes sharp on mine. I forced a nod, just thinking. She studied me for a long beat, then reached into her bag and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "This is a contact at the office. Trustworthy. If you want to follow that paper trail, start here." I took it, sliding it into my apron pocket like contraband. But before I could thank her, she leaned in, her tone suddenly colder. "Careful, Cass. You're not invisible anymore. They already have eyes on you." My chest tightened. The hum of the dryer, the faint gospel song on the radio, the smell of burning hair, it all warped into something sinister. They thought they could watch me. They thought I'd scare easy. I smiled in the mirror, though it didn't reach my eyes. Let them watch. The church smelled of lemon oil and old hymnals, the kind of scent that clung to Sunday dresses long after service. The choir's voices rose upstairs, practicing a hymn I hadn't sung in years. The sound should have comforted me, but instead it rattled like a warning bell. I moved quietly down the back stairwell, my shoes barely whispering against the linoleum. The basement was cooler, lined with metal filing cabinets and stacks of donation envelopes. This wasn't where prayers were lifted, it was where they were counted. I scanned the shelves until I found a box marked Community Fund Records. My heart hammered as I pulled it down, the cardboard soft from years of handling. I flipped open the lid and leafed through the files. Names, amounts, dates. But the patterns leapt out quick. The same companies listed again and again, donations in neat round numbers that smelled too clean to be honest. And there it was, Devin's signature tied to authorizations, his name threaded through pages like rot creeping under paint. I should have felt victory, but instead a deeper chill settled in. These weren't just Devin's fingerprints. This entire church was drinking from the same poisoned well. The pastor's wife, the ushers, the choir that sang overhead, they weren't innocent bystanders. They were beneficiaries. And if Alexa was showing up every Sunday beside Devin, holding her head high, clapping her hands to the music, she wasn't just complicit. She was covered in the same stain. My stomach nodded. "Can I help you, Sister Marrow?" The voice startled me. I spun around to see Deacon Lewis, tall and wide, his suit straining against his shoulders, his brows furrowed, suspicion already carving lines in his face. I forced a smile and held up the small plastic bag I'd brought with me, a few bottles of conditioner and setting lotion. Pastor's wife asked me to drop off some supplies. You know she likes her hair ready for revival weekend. His gaze lingered on the open box at my feet, then on the bag in my hand. A long pause. Finally, he grunted. "She does like her curls." He stepped closer, closing the box lid with one heavy hand. "Best leave this down here, though. Ain't no place for you." I nodded quickly, pressing the bag into his hand. My palms were slick, but my face stayed calm. I slipped past him, climbing the stairs as the choir swelled, louder above, voices straining toward heaven while their foundation rotted beneath them. By the time I stepped outside, the evening sun was painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet. I sucked in the humid air like I'd been underwater. My hands were still shaking. That was when my phone buzzed. A message lit the screen from an unknown number. "Stay out of it, Marrow." The words burned into me. My name. Not Cassandra. Not Cass. Marrow. As if I was just a last name to erase, a problem to be scrubbed like dirt. I stared at the screen, the choir's song still faint in the background. A sick echo. They thought a warning would scare me off. But all it did was confirm one thing: someone inside that church had eyes on me. The stench hit me before I even unlocked the front door. Acrid, sharp, the unmistakable burn of chemical spills. I pushed inside and froze. My salon, my refuge, was gutted. Every mirror on the wall was shattered, jagged teeth of glass littering the floor. The bottles of dye and relaxer had been overturned, bleeding across the tile in toxic rivers. Chairs were slashed open, foam guts spilling out like wounds. My breath caught in my chest. This wasn't a random break-in. It was a message. By noon, word had spread through the block. Neighbors lingered outside, clients whispering to each other in hushed voices. Devin must have done this. Cass finally pushed too far. She don't know who she's messing with. I sat in the middle of the wreckage, glass crunching under my shoes, their words pressing down, heavier than the heat creeping through the cracked window. It wasn't just a salon. It was years of sweat, of early mornings and late nights, of women trusting me with their crowns while pouring out their pain. And now it lay in ruins because I dared to tug at Devin's empire. I picked up a shard of glass, watching my distorted reflection ripple across its surface. Devin's face flashed in my mind, smug, confident, untouchable. I'd seen the way he worked a room, always 3 steps behind the mayor, whispering in his ear like a puppeteer. I'd watched him at church, basking in the pastor's blessing, cloaking his ambition in scripture. And last night, in the choir's song and the files in the basement, I saw it clearer. He didn't just want money. He wanted control, power, to erase anyone who could stand in his way. And right now, that someone was me. I let the shard drop, my hand trembling. Am I in too deep? I whispered to the wreckage, because maybe I was. Maybe I had no business trying to fight a man who had the mayor on speed dial and a congregation singing his praises. Maybe I was just a hairstylist with a bleeding hand and a broken business. The thought hollowed me out. Then my phone rang. Blocked number. I almost let it go, but something in my gut made me swipe the screen. Hello. What answered wasn't a voice I expected. It was Alexa's, screaming, "Mom." The line cut off, her voice torn away like fabric ripped in two. Silence swallowed the room. I stared at the phone, my heart pounding so hard it drowned the world. If Devin wanted to send me a message, this one was louder than broken mirrors. I didn't breathe until I saw her, Alexa, curled on the couch, scrolling her phone like nothing had happened. No tears, no bruises, no sign she'd been in danger. Relief hit me, but it didn't last, because the distance in her eyes was a wall I couldn't climb. "Alexa," I whispered, my voice breaking despite myself. "What happened? You called me screaming." She looked up, blank, then quickly shook her head. "You're exaggerating, Mom." My phone dropped. Must have sounded weird. That was it. No hug, no explanation. Just dismissal, like my fear was foolish. And then he appeared. Devin leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, smirk curling on his lips like smoke. He didn't say a word, but he didn't need to. That look was enough. He wanted me to know he heard the panic in my voice. and enjoyed every second of it. I clenched my hands to keep them from shaking. Alexa avoided my eyes, her body angled toward him like he was gravity itself. That's when it hit me. Maybe she wasn't just caught in his shadow. Maybe she chose it. Maybe she liked the power he wore like cologne, the influence that came with being his wife. Or maybe she was too far gone to see the chains. Alexa, I tried again, softer this time. You don't have to defend him. Not to me. Her shoulders stiffened. You're always so negative about Devin. He's building something, Mom, bigger than you understand. My chest tightened. Bigger. She exhaled, impatient, as if I was the child and she the mother. There's a fundraiser next week. After that, everything will be set. The second the words left her mouth, she froze. I saw it in her face, the instant regret. Devin's eyes narrowed at her, the smirk faltering. What fundraiser? I pressed, but she backtracked fast. It's nothing, just a church thing. She stood abruptly, brushing past me. You should go, Mom. You don't belong here anymore. Her words cut, but it wasn't just pain I felt, it was revelation. That fundraiser wasn't just a church bake sale. It was where the pieces would fall into place, where Devin's clean face and dirty hands would shake in plain sight. And if I wanted to pull the rug from under him, I had to do it on his stage. For the first time since I'd been shoved out of my own house, I felt something sharp ignite in me, not just anger, not just humiliation. Strategy. I turned to leave, my eyes brushing against Devin's one last time. He smiled faintly, but I didn't flinch. Not this time. Because the plan was forming. If the devil was hosting dinner, I'd be at the head of the table. Miss Aura Rivers, retired city clerk, met me at her kitchen table, stacks of manila folders fanned out like a dealer's hand in a rigged game. She had always been one of my oldest clients, a woman with a quiet smile and sharper ears than people gave her credit for. I told you, Cassandra, she said, sliding a folder toward me. Every donation, every property transfer, every funnel. These things leave paper trails, even when men like Devin think they're smarter than the system. I opened the folder. The names and numbers blurred at first, then sharpened into meaning. Checks from community funds deposited into shell accounts. Money trickling into the church under the disguise of mission projects. Devin's name stamped here, circled there. My throat went dry. This was it. Proof. But as I flipped page after page, Alexa's name appeared too. Not as the mastermind, not even as a participant, just in the signatures. Joint accounts, tax filings, the kind of paperwork a wife signs without question. It hit me like a blade to the chest. If this came out, Alexa wouldn't just be humiliated. She'd be implicated. Miss Aura watched me carefully. This is your leverage, but leverage cuts both ways. I sat back, pressing my fingers against my temple. A week ago, I was a mother begging for her place at her own table. Now, I wasn't begging. I wasn't even grieving. I was cold, calculating. Still, the question gnawed at me. Was I willing to burn Alexa's future to see Devin fall? The thought scared me, not because I didn't know the answer, but because deep down, I did. Make me copies, I told Miss Aura, my voice low. Every page, every name. If I go down, I want something in my hands that can pull him with me. She nodded once, no judgment in her eyes, only understanding. Careful, Cass. Men like Devin don't play checkers. They play chess with loaded guns under the table. That night, I spread the copies across my bed like puzzle pieces, arranging them, tracing connections with my fingertip. Devon's empire looked untouchable in the daylight, but on paper, he was sloppy, greedy, too sure of himself. I leaned back, exhaling. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was war. And then the envelope slid under my door. No knock, no sound of footsteps, just the whisper of paper against wood. I stared at it for a long time before picking it up. Inside was a single card. No logo, no flourish, just a message, typed, "You're invited." Below, the date and time of the fundraiser Alexa had mentioned. At the bottom, a signature, or rather, the absence of one. Just 3 words. "We need to talk." My hands trembled, but not from fear, from anticipation. Someone else was in this game, and they wanted me at the table. I recognized the cologne before I saw him. That same sharp cedar blend Kendrick used to wear when we were young, back when I still thought loyalty could cure betrayal. He was waiting for me in the corner booth of a dim steakhouse downtown, nursing a drink like it was the only thing keeping him alive. "Cassandra," he said, his voice lower than I remembered. "Sit." I stayed standing for a beat, scanning the room. No one I knew, just the faint hiss of a grill and the clink of ice. Finally, I slid into the booth opposite him. "You," I whispered. "You're the one who invited me?" He leaned back, lips pressed tight. I had to. I studied his face. He'd aged not gracefully, but in that restless way men do when they bury their sins under expensive suits. His eyes flicked left and right, wary. "You know about Devon," I said. Kendrick didn't deny it. He took a long sip before answering. "I've known for months. The laundering, the church, the mayor's office. I've seen the numbers." My jaw clenched. "And you said nothing?" His silence was answer enough, but I pushed. "Why, Kendrick? Why let our daughter sleep beside a criminal?" He flinched just slightly. "Because my name is tied to his. My cases, my clients. If it comes out I knew, I lose everything. My career, my seat at the table." I laughed, sharp and humorless. "So you'd rather watch Alexa sink with him than risk your reputation?" His face hardened. "Don't talk like you don't understand. Power keeps this city moving. Reputation keeps men like me breathing. I can't afford scandal." I stared at him, a mix of disgust and clarity settling in. This was the man I once built a life with. This was the man I sacrificed years for. And now he was nothing but another coward hiding behind his own reflection. "You invited me here to what? Confess? Beg me to stay quiet?" "No." He slid a flash drive across the table. "Proof. Documents Devon gave me to look over. I can't use them, but maybe you can. Just be smart, Cassandra. You're in deeper than you realize." I didn't touch the drive. "You think I'm afraid?" "I think you're reckless," he said, his gaze locked on mine. "And recklessness gets people killed." The words clung to me as I left the steakhouse, the drive heavy in my pocket like a stone. Rain slicked the streets outside, and that's when I saw it, a black SUV idling across the road. Tinted windows. Engine low. When I turned left, it turned left. When I slowed, it slowed. My pulse hammered. I cut down an alley, weaving past trash bins, my heels splashing through puddles. The SUV rolled parallel on the street, keeping pace, unhurried, like a predator playing with prey. At the corner, I ducked into a pharmacy and pretended to browse. Through the rain-streaked glass, the SUV waited. When I finally stepped back into the night, it was gone. Relief hit me too soon. Back in my car, I reached into my purse for my keys. That's when my fingers brushed paper. Something I hadn't put there. I pulled it out with shaking hands. A photograph. My salon. Engulfed in flames. I gasped, the air choking in my throat. Someone wanted me to see my future before it arrived. The smell hit me before the sight did. Acrid smoke, charred chemicals, the bitter tang of melted plastic, and hair dye clinging to the night air. My salon, my second home, my survival was gone. The windows were black hollows, the brick walls smeared with soot. Inside, ash crunched beneath my shoes were chairs and mirrors used to stand. For years, those walls had held laughter, gossip, prayers whispered between braids. I built it chair by chair, curling iron by curling iron, late nights sweeping floors just to keep the lights on. And now, nothing but ruin. I sank to my knees, the weight of it crushing down. My chest burned as if the fire had crawled inside me too. By morning, word spread fast. Clients drifted past the wreckage, whispering behind their hands. Some shook their heads with pity. Others crossed the street like misfortune was contagious. Nobody asked what really happened. Nobody dared. I found a liquor store 3 blocks away. I hadn't touched alcohol since Alexa was a baby, too much of my mama's ghosts in those bottles. But tonight, grief and rage demanded numbing. I sat in the guest house later, a cheap bottle of bourbon open on the counter, the burn sliding down my throat until the room swayed. Tears came hot and ugly. I wasn't crying just for the salon. I was crying for the years I gave Kendrick, for the daughter who wouldn't meet my eyes, for the version of myself that still believed sacrifice meant safety. Around noon the next day, Mrs. Ora Rivers showed up at the door, her face pale. "Cass, I saw the news." "Devin," I said hoarsely, my voice gravel from drink and smoke. It had to be him. Mrs. Ora shifted, uneasy. "I believe you, but I didn't sign up for a war, Cassandra. This is bigger than property records. You're going up against the mayor's circle, the church, Devin's money. It's not safe for me." My stomach dropped. "So you're leaving me too?" She avoided my eyes. "I have a family, grandkids." "I can't." She stopped, then turned and walked out. The silence afterward was deafening. Even the bottle beside me felt like betrayal. By evening, I forced myself back to the ruins. I needed something, anything, to anchor me. I sifted through soot with gloved hands, coughing through the dust. Most things crumbled at my touch. Scorched receipts, twisted hair dryers, shards of shattered glass. But near the back wall, half buried under a beam, I found it. A page, singed at the edges, but legible. Devin's handwriting. The same mocking scrawl I'd seen before. "The old crow won't last long." Only this time, the note bore his signature at the bottom. Proof. Proof that he'd marked me, targeted me, tried to erase me. Proof that this wasn't an accident. I held it in trembling hands, my despair curdling into something harder, sharper. The fire hadn't buried me. It had planted me, and like any seed in the dark, I was going to grow back. Stronger, deadlier. They thought they buried me. I whispered to the wind, rising from the ashes with the note clutched tight. But I was the seed. Grief has a way of hardening into steel if you let it. The fire had taken my salon, stripped me of a livelihood, and scared off the one ally willing to stand beside me. But as I sat at the small desk in the guest house, smoke still clinging faintly to my clothes, I realized they hadn't silenced me. They'd only sharpened me. I laid everything out in front of me. Property deeds, donation slips, transaction records Mrs. Aura had once helped me collect. The flash drive Kendrick had slipped across the table, its weight no longer suffocating but liberating. And Devin's note, his arrogance preserved in black ink, signed with his own hand. Piece by piece, I copied everything. Printer humming, pages sliding out warm and steady, until I had a folder thick with evidence. Not rumor, not whispers, facts. His schemes tied to the church, the mayor's office, the money he funneled through so-called community programs. The kind of truth that could burn longer and hotter than any fire. For the first time in weeks, my hands didn't shake. I thought about Alexa, my daughter, my baby girl, now standing in another woman's shadow, her husband's shadow. Would she hate me forever for what I was about to do? Maybe, but I couldn't protect her by staying silent. Silence had already cost me too much. I poured myself black coffee, ditching the bourbon. My head throbbed, but my resolve cut clean through it. Tomorrow night, Devin's fundraiser would take place at the Franklin Hall downtown. I'd overheard Alexa calling it, "The night everything will be set." Devin planned to stand at the podium, chest puffed, grinning like the king of a city he thought he owned. The mayor would clap, the church would bless it, and his parents would beam at the man they believed had conquered it all. Unless I stopped him, I walked through the guest house, picking up the few things the fire hadn't taken. My old black dress, pressed and folded. A silver necklace Alexa made for me in second grade, beads chipped but intact. A small leather bag, large enough to carry the folder without drawing eyes. I rehearsed my steps in my head. How I'd walk into Franklin Hall unnoticed. How I'd wait for the moment his lies dripped smooth into the microphone. And how I'd drop the truth like thunder in front of everyone who thought Devin was untouchable. Fear whispered in the corners of my mind. But for once, I didn't entertain it. Devin had taken my home, my business, and my peace. Kendrick had chosen his reputation over his family. Alexa had chosen blindness. What more could they strip from me? I stood in front of the mirror. My reflection looked older, harder, but alive in a way I hadn't seen since the day I first signed the papers for my salon. My voice, the one I thought I'd lost, came back strong. They wanted me small, I said quietly, staring myself down. But I am not small. The folder snapped shut, neat and ready. The weapon no one could burn this time. I pressed it to my chest, my heartbeat steady beneath it. Tomorrow night, I whispered into the silence, it ends, one way or another. Franklin Hall glittered like a jewel box under the chandeliers, every table covered in white linen and gold trim. Wine glasses clinked, laughter swirled, and the city's most polished faces leaned in close for whispered deals. At the front, Devin stood at the podium, beaming like a king who believed the crown had already been welded to his skull. I stood in the shadows near the entrance, the folder pressed to my chest, the true homeowner, Mr. Latham, the man who had never released the deed, beside me. He adjusted his tie nervously, but I didn't give him the chance to back out. When Devin spread his arms wide, Soaking in the applause, I stepped into the light. Gasps cut through the room like glass shattering. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Cassandra Marrow, someone whispered. Phones lifted into the air, recording, snapping. Devin's smile faltered, the mask slipping. I walked straight to the podium, the sound of my heels echoing through the stunned silence. Mr. Latham followed, clutching his copy of the deed. When we reached the front, I opened the folder and spread the papers across the podium like a hand of cards in a rigged game. These, I said, my voice steady, are the records your so-called community leader doesn't want you to see. Proof of laundering, proof of stolen funds, and proof, I tapped the deed, that this house Devin parades as his kingdom is not his at all. Gasps grew louder. Devin's parents, seated near the front, went pale, their faces collapsing into horror. Alexa, my Alexa, trembled, clutching her wine glass so tightly it threatened to shatter. Devin lunged toward me, his voice cracking. This is lies. Slander. But the room wasn't on his side anymore. Phones were still up, lenses capturing every second. The air had shifted, power bleeding out of him. Then he snapped, not into anger, but into something worse. His voice dropped, desperate, raw. She knew, he shouted, pointing at Alexa with a trembling hand. Every detail, every transfer, every dollar, it was her idea. Cassandra, your daughter isn't blind. She's been with me in it all. A wave rippled across the room. Gasps. A woman at one of the front tables covered her mouth. All eyes shifted to Alexa, her face drained, lips parting, but no denial came. Just silence. The ground tilted beneath me. My daughter, the baby I once cradled, the girl who braided my hair in the kitchen, the woman I thought trapped by his lies, standing in complicity. My hand gripped the microphone, shaking. I could feel the weight of it, the power humming through the cord. One word from me, one confirmation, one push, and Alexa would be finished alongside him. The folder lay open before me, truth bleeding across its pages. The room held its breath. Devin's parents sagged in their seats, shame etched across their faces. Mr. Latham shifted uncomfortably, waiting for me to end it. I stared at Alexa. Her eyes met mine, wide and shimmering, not with innocence, but with the panic of someone exposed. Devin's voice cracked again. Tell them, Cassandra. Tell them it was her idea. Don't let me drown alone. The microphone was cold in my hand. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I had spent months preparing to bury him, but now the decision before me was far heavier. My own blood, my only daughter. The silence stretched until it screamed, and I whispered, low but shaking. My hand shook over the microphone. One word, and Alexa was finished. The silence broke with my voice. Devin orchestrated every cent of this scheme. I said into the microphone, locking eyes with him. And my daughter, she was manipulated into believing his lies. She trusted him, like I once trusted men who didn't deserve it. But trust doesn't make you guilty. Devin does. The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, cameras flashing like lightning. Devin lunged forward, but security closed in, dragging him back as he thrashed and cursed. Lies. She's covering for her. She's covering for her. His voice cracked, echoing off the chandeliers, until the sound of handcuffs silenced him. The mayor slipped out a side door, face pale. The church leaders shrank in their seats, phones buzzing with reporters already spinning the story. Devin's parents sat frozen, their pride collapsing into shame. Alexa, she didn't move. She stood trembling, her glass finally slipping from her hand, shattering across the floor. Her eyes burned into me, a mixture of betrayal, fear, and something I couldn't name. She didn't thank me. She didn't deny him. She just turned and walked out, her heels tapping like nails into the floor, vanishing into the crowd. By morning, the headlines painted the city red. Mayor's aide arrested in laundering scandal. Church funds tied to fraud. Photos of Devin, handcuffed and scowling, plastered every front page. My name appeared too, Cassandra Merrow, the woman who had ripped the mask off a rising star. Legally, I had won. Socially, I had carved myself into the city's memory. Even Kendrick couldn't hide. Reporters hounded him for why he hadn't spoken sooner. The mighty were falling, and I had pushed them. But victories come dressed in silence. The house was mine again. Mr. Latham, with weary relief, signed the deed over properly this time. I walked through its rooms, touching the walls I once decorated with wedding photos, school pictures, holiday garlands. Now the frames were gone, stripped bare. The air echoed with absence. Alexa's laughter no longer drifted through the halls. Devin's parents were gone. Even the faint perfume of celebration that had once mocked me on the porch had burned away. I had the house, the proof, the justice, but not her. That night, I sat in the kitchen alone, the same kitchen where I once braided Alexa's hair before school, where Kendrick once kissed my cheek before late nights of studying law. The silence pressed down heavy. Neighbors whispered outside, their voices carrying, "She really did it. Took them all down." I stared at the papers stacked neatly on the table, the trophies of my war. My name cleared, my enemies shamed, my home restored. And still I felt hollow, because victory doesn't refill the spaces people leave behind. It doesn't braid your hair in the morning or call you mama in the dark. It just sits with you, cold and unyielding. I closed my eyes, whispering into the empty house. I got everything I wanted, and yet victory tasted like ash. I didn't move back into the main house. People expected me to. After all, wasn't that the whole point of my war? To reclaim the home they tried to steal? But the truth was simpler. I no longer needed to live inside those walls to prove they were mine. Instead, I unlocked the door to the guest house, the very place I'd once been shoved into like an unwanted tenant. The space was modest, a single kitchen, a quiet bedroom, the window that faced the porch where they had laughed at me. I stood in the doorway, breathing in the silence, and made my decision. The main house would remain untouched. No paint, no furniture, no family photos. A monument, not a home. A reminder carved into the land itself. Every brick, every shutter, every creaking stair was a scar, and scars deserved to be seen. Some nights I sat on the porch of the guest house, looking out at the larger home lit only by the moon. It looked hollow now, stripped of its laughter and its lies. That hollowness soothed me, but my life couldn't stop there. I found a new building downtown, far from the ashes of what had been. The lease was steep, but when I walked through the empty space, I could already see mirrors lining the walls, chairs waiting for voices, scissors flashing like sparks in the air. My new salon rose from those bones like a phoenix. This time, my name crowned the entrance in bold silver letters. Cassandra's. No Merrow. No man's shadow. Just me. On opening day, the smell of fresh paint mixed with hairspray, and laughter. Clients hugged me, old and new, whispering that they were proud I had survived, that I had fought, that I had won. Their faith gave me back what the fire tried to take, not just my livelihood, but my identity. Word of Devon's downfall lingered in gossip, but less each day. The city had new scandals to chew on, and his name sank lower in the headlines. Alexa's absence hurt. Yes, a quiet ache that pulsed in the background of every success, but I stopped waiting for her to walk through my door. People make their choices. She made hers. One afternoon, while sweeping the sidewalk outside my salon, Mrs. Carter from across the street leaned over her fence. She'd watched my battles from the sidelines, never saying much, but always there. "Cass," she called, "you ever think about selling that house now? Starting fresh?" I leaned on the broom, glanced down the street, and smiled faintly. "No," I said, "some scars need to stay where they can be seen." She nodded slowly, as if she understood more than she said, and went back to her garden. That night, I returned to the guest house. I lit a single lamp, brewed tea, and sat at the window, watching the silhouette of the main house. It loomed like a stone giant, quiet, immovable, no longer mocking me. They had tried to erase me from my home, from my family, from the life I built with my own hands. But I survived. I endured. I won. And in the end, I didn't just write myself back into the story. I carved myself into stone.